G'day and welcome back to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, I'm going to show you how to install a flywheel, clutch plate and pressure plate on a Morris Minor. Alright, so we have our freshly machined flywheel here. Sometimes in transport, to prevent it rusting, what they do is they put a little bit of wax or oil around the mating surface just to help prevent it rusting. So all we're going to do is just grab a little bit of brake cleaner. We're going to rub it with a rag around the outside just to ensure that when we mount the clutch plate, it's not going to slip. Alright, now she's clean, we can reinstall it. So some flywheels only go on one particular way, like we spoke about originally. This one goes on in one direction, so pretty straightforward. All right, so grab your bolt and we're just going to start that by finger. Now, generally a good rule of thumb here is when you're installing new flywheel bolts, they're not the sort of bolts you want to come loose. So grab yourself a little bit of Loctite, a little bit of dab on the end, wind them in and let's torque them up. Now, I should also note, these are not only a double hex 14mm bolt, they're also an ARP bolt, so they are super heavy duty and rated for what we are doing. So I'm just grabbing a 14mm double hex socket and just tightening it up. So once again, just tighten it up gently and then we're going to come back and we're going to use a torque wrench. All right, once they're done up finger tight, we're then just going to grab our torque wrench and we're going to tighten them to 40 foot-pound. Now this is when it can become a little bit tricky to be able to hold it and torque them at the same time. But if you're like me and you've had your Weet-Bix this morning, you can hold the flywheel and prevent it turning. All right, now they're tightened up, we can go and grab our pen and then mark the bolts. All right, now you've torqued all the bolts, we can then go and grab our marker and put a marking on there as well. All right, next is to install the clutch plate. Now this will only go one particular way, so if you get it wrong, you're gonna know pretty well straight away. So it's not gonna go like this simply because it's gonna get stuck on the springs internally. It's going to go like this. Now, it's worthwhile having a clutch aligning tool, and in this case, I have an old input shaft out of a Morris Minor gearbox. Or it might even be out of a Sprite, I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to consult with Colin from Sprite Parts. So because this flywheel has been balanced, it does have a whiteout mark just here, and at about the 9 o'clock position here on the flywheel. So we just need to make sure that we realign those. That way we can ensure that the entire thing is going to be balanced again. All right, so once it's lined up, grab your pressure plate bolts, tighten them up by hand, and then just work yourself around in a clockwise motion or anti-clockwise, whichever way you feel necessary. Put in all the bolts and then we can come back and torque them up. So before we go and tighten them up, I'm just going to grab the input shaft, just line it up with the spigot bush on the crankshaft. I'm just going to grab my ratchet and I'm just going to nip these up in a bit of a star-shaped pattern. Yes, before I get feedback from everyone in the comment section, I'm well aware that using a power tool doing this is not the best idea, but I've done this a million times. That's not to say that it's ever going to fail, but this is a method I've generally done when I've tightened up a pressure plate. All right, once again, grab your torque wrench and we're going to go around and tighten all these flywheel bolts, or the pressure plate bolts, should I say, to 25 foot-pound. All right, once again, once you've gone and torqued them, we're then going to go and put a dab of texture on each of the bolts to show that we've actually done them up. All right, folks, well, that's the end of the episode. I hope you guys learned something. It is pretty straightforward on how to install this on not only an A-series engine, but also a fairly standard engine, anything that is north-south. It's got a pretty easy sort of routine to follow in order to tighten this sort of stuff up. Sometimes you can buy special locking tools that will lock the flywheel, but as I said, because I have my Weet-Bix and I'm just a strong bloke, I was able to hold the flywheel, although in saying that, it's only really done up to 40 foot-pound, which isn't that great of a torque setting. You can probably even use the A-series flywheel locking tool that sits through here. All you need is a couple of long bolts to be able to secure it, tighten it up, and then it will actually hold the flywheel as well. So it just prevents it moving. It's not a necessity, but it is a great tool to have. If you haven't already, check it out on my channel. And guys, there's plenty more to come on the series, so stay tuned and we'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.